Namaste and welcome to this edition of Beyond the Obvious. The title of my talk today is A Tale of 2 Months. And I came to the topic simply because I wanted to share with the audience the 2 months that I'm wanting to talk about were March of 21 and April of 21. Both were dramatically different months for India, and both these months have a common script, which is COVID, and it's very important to go beyond the obvious and see what happened to India between these 2 months. So what I'm going to start with is first March of 21. Let's just go through what was India's status in March of 21. These are the basic headlines. In March, India was at under 10,000 cases a day. For a population of 1.3 billion people, for a population of 130 crore, we were down to 10,000 cases a day. We had the lowest fatality rates in the country, in the world actually. The country had just opened up after one of the strictest lockdowns the world had ever seen. So I think the lockdown had opened up sometime in December of 2020. It was 3 months into the lockdown. That means from December the lockdown had opened up. March 21 was when the lockdown had started, the opening up of the lockdown had started to show results. Stock markets were touching an all-time high, industrial production was inching up, it was again starting to be at pre-COVID levels. Most importantly, in the month of March, India was a vaccine exporter, such that it was also called vaccine diplomacy, where we had started exporting vaccines to 70 odd countries. Now that has massive implications for India's geopolitics and strategic standing in the world. And also one aspect that we tend to overlook very often is that at the same time, there were roughly, I think there were only 5 countries that were manufacturing vaccines in the month of March, and India was one of them. So you can see that there was a thread of good news starting to appear for India in the month of March of 2021, which is barely 3 months ago. As a nation, we were being hailed in the global media as a beacon of hope, as a nation that could be proud of itself in the way it handled COVID. And of course, a lot of global media looked at India and said this is a great model to follow. And it's quite obvious that many things started to fall well and into place for India. And I think one of the aspects that we tend to overlook very often is that while there were only 5 countries manufacturing vaccines, within that we had at least minimum 3 to 4 companies within India trying to manufacture the vaccine. So I think a slew of good news started to appear, and I think the one that got us the maximum brownie points was the fact that we were a vaccine exporter. And all of this changed in the month of April. In April of 2021, the entire scenario looked completely different, and I'm just going to quickly go through what April looked like for India. In less than 30 days, from March 21 to April 21, India went from 10,000 cases a day to over 4 lakh cases a day. 4 lakh cases became the highest number of cases in the world. We crossed the American caseload also. At 4.5 lakh cases a day, it was like a number that no other country had hit. From being a vaccine exporter, suddenly the demands for the vaccines were so huge within India. From being a vaccine exporter, we turned to becoming a vaccine importer. The scenario completely altered, and instead of sending vaccines to 70 countries, we were actually wanting imports from the United States or from the European Union. Local lockdowns started getting imposed all over again. States were imposing lockdowns. The center was asking states to impose lockdowns. Our medical oxygen requirement shot up from 900 metric tons a day to 9,000 metric tons a day, which is a 10-time increase in less than 30 days. Now, I just want you to imagine what it means for what kind of a logistical nightmare it can be for any company, for any manufacturing outfit, if suddenly the demand goes up by 10 times in a span of 30 days. How do you kind of create the logistics and the supply chains to kind of adhere to such critical demand? And this was medical oxygen. This is not a mobile phone or toothpaste. This was the demand for medical oxygen, which was critical for saving patients. Went up 10 times. There was a complete breakdown of health infrastructure, because clearly if the caseload went to 4 lakh cases a day, no medical infrastructure could have provided for such a massive inflow of patients. No country in the world could have handled this kind of caseload. The images of Indians dying and gasping for breath and pyres being lit was spread all over the world. And so what is amazing is that in March, we were the beacon of hope. We were like the poster boy for a successful handling of COVID. But in April, the photographs that were being splashed all over the world were from drones, were like shots of pyres being lit and India gasping for breath. And clearly this was like one of the worst moments in the history of India. When it came to our image and our ability to handle such a huge disaster. Interestingly, it was Bombay that was hit first in the month of March. Then the next city was Delhi in the month of April. My own family had 5 people down with COVID, all of them within a specific week of April. It seemed as if Delhi had every household in Delhi, virtually every household in Delhi had COVID. And the third city to get hit was Bangalore in the month of May. So the first casualty of COVID in the second wave was the financial capital of India, Bombay. The second casualty was the national capital of India, that's Delhi. And then the third hit came to the IT capital of India, which is Bangalore. Again, there's a pattern here. It starts with Bombay, goes to Delhi, and then finally it's Bangalore. Again, you can see that it directly hits on all aspects of what India is recognized for, or largely what it is known for: Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore. And I mean, these similarities may sound very obvious, but you've got to connect the dots to see if there's a pattern emerging out here. There are a few things that went wrong. And some very obvious ones, that there was a huge influx of passengers, international passengers coming in from the United Kingdom and Canada, whether they came in for the farmers' protests or whether they came in at the borders to kind of show solidarity with farmers. I'm not getting into that. That is something that could be the reason for them coming in. It doesn't matter what they came in for, but the fact of the matter is that there was a huge multiple influx of passengers coming in from UK and from Canada that probably got in a certain variant in. States took their eye off the ball. I think many states took their eye off the ball. Maharashtra, Kerala seemed to be at the forefront of taking their eye off the ball. To some extent, Delhi as well as a state took its eye off the ball. While the centre was accused of Kumbh Melas and Bengal election rallies, fact of the matter is that collectively as a nation, I think we had passengers coming in, we had Melas, and then we have election rallies, states taking off. So you can kind of say that there was this culmination of many factors which probably led to an explosion, but it couldn't have been so severe. I mean, it's hard to explain how does a country go from 10,000 to 4 lakhs, and I've been repeating this, that it's less than 30 days. So you can attribute some points to kind of fit it into a reason, but I think it goes beyond these reasons. Now in the month of July, from 4 lakh cases and a positivity rate of almost 20%, India is now down to roughly 35,000 cases a day. Our positivity rate is down to 2%, which is quite a shift down. So we're back in a space where we are controlling COVID quite sharply. India continues to have the lowest fatality rates in the world. Now, so while there have been tremendous amount of deaths and many unaccounted deaths as well, fact of the matter is that there's still the lowest fatality rates in the world, which is a good sign given the size of our population. At least we've had lower fatality rates. Otherwise, that could have really hurt us very badly. The corollary to that is that it's the highest recovery rates in the world at 96%. What is also very good now is that we have amongst the highest vaccinated number of people. Now, we're almost 30 crore people have got vaccinated. As a percentage to our total population is very less, but in absolutes is the highest in the world. Now, it's a good sign that the absolutes are large, and at least we are heading towards a good population getting vaccinated with the first and second doses. But yes, as a percentage to total population, it's still small, and that pace that is gathering pace. Today, we are at averaging 40 to 45 lakh vaccines a day in the country. Very soon, this is expected to touch 1 crore vaccines a day. My guess is, and I think from what I'm reading, I think by September, October, that is a quarter of September, October, around that phase of September, October, November, India will start hitting about 1 crore vaccines a day. Probably by December, we would have achieved some form of herd immunity because a large set of population would have got covered by vaccines. So that's a really good sign. It's a good indicator. Like I said, oxygen supply went from 900 metric tons to 9,000. That means the logistics behind it, the way to carry it, the production of it, getting it to every state was sorted in less than 40-45 days. So it's very easy to just say that 900 became 9,000, but you got to appreciate the fact that every possible element of the government was pressed into service. Now, I don't mean central, I meant central, state, defense services, railways. I mean the entire structure came into place to move, produce and deliver medical oxygen such that people could receive it. Today we've reached a stage where 10,000 metric tons is now a regular feature. If a third wave hits and if the caseload goes up, India is in a position to use that medical oxygen capacity that it has now created. Testing is amongst the highest in the world. We as a nation have the highest number of tested people on a daily basis. The tests are going on, whether it's UP, Delhi. I think, for example, UP has the highest number of testings being done on people. In Delhi, I know for a fact that 75,000 tests a day. So I think that metric is also shaping up really well. India is still amongst the very few countries in the world, just 5 countries that has created a vaccine, which in itself is quite a remarkable feat, given that many other countries probably are trying but are still a little distance away from creating the vaccine. Here we have 2 manufacturers already up and running. I think something like 1 crore jabs a day is like vaccinating 1 country a day. Kuwait, Singapore, Qatar. Almost we'll reach a stage where we'll vaccinate 1 country a day. So all of those things are starting to look good. I think RBI did a remarkably good job in making sure that credit facilities and monetary policies were in favor of keeping everything stable. That worked well. Corporate India did well with its CSR program. I think everything really kind of in the last 3 months has come together to move away from the disaster of April to a much more stable July. But it still doesn't take away the fact that in less than 30 days, India went from being a beacon to being a disaster. And that really, I think it's important to try and see what could be the reason for that. And I don't think it was simply passengers and melas and rallies. There's something beyond all of this. Suddenly in the media, if you notice in global media, in the last few days, or at least in the last few weeks, there's been tremendous talk of trying to figure out whether COVID, the virus itself, is man-made or is it natural. And a lot of media is now focused and research is now focused on the fact that this could very well be a man-made virus, probably leaked. Now, I think it's very important for us to understand that if that theory is correct, that this is a man-made virus, it changes the entire complexion of the discussion, because in the first place, why would someone be experimenting with supposedly gain of function virology in laboratories? You got to start questioning a lot of things as to why was research being conducted on a virus like this. Was it prepared to attack certain genes and not attack certain sets of genes, which again seems to be a possibility. For example, how come India had so many cases but not Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan at the same time? Many things start to come into question, but what is really important, and something I'm sure all of you have also noticed, that certainly in the last 30 days or particularly in the month of June, a whole lot of research and very credible research is starting to question that this is not a natural virus. And I think it's important to understand that if it's not natural, if it is man-made, then the implications and seriousness of the situation is much more. My own assessment is that this is a man-made virus. Whether it leaked by mistake or it is a deliberate leak is still to be decided. It's still to be there's a judgmental issue around that. But in my assessment, this is definitely a man-made virus because it's been perfected. And there's so much to read upon that, like the way this particular virus gets attached to and takes away powers of the lung. I mean, it's just that entire complexity kind of suggests that this has been produced in a lab. If it has been produced in a lab, the implications for India and for the world are quite serious. And that's what gets me to the conclusion that I think it's very important to remember that no country could have handled such a huge attack on itself. And I think we sometimes become very harsh on ourselves as a nation, because a man-made virus is actually biological warfare. And my own assumption and assessment is that I think we came under direct bioweapons attack. Now, this may sound like a conspiracy theory and way out of proportion, but most data, most research, and most aspects of this point towards a biological warfare attack on this country. And certainly the sequencing, the way cities got taken out, the way virtually this virus entered every household, it could not have happened just very naturally. And the last thing I want to end by saying is that who is the biggest beneficiary in all of this? It seems as if today China is the biggest beneficiary, certainly on an Indo-China relationship basis. For example, the one thing that we were doing very well was exporting vaccines to 70 countries. Now that we are not exporting and we are using this for domestic consumption, where are those vaccines coming from? Who is giving those vaccines to 70 countries? Those 70 countries, Indonesia, Vietnam, Bhutan, Nepal, I mean, there's a huge list. They need vaccines. Now, who's supplying them? And the answer is China. And suddenly you'll notice that those countries that are at loggerheads with China on geopolitics and on sea space, etc., are now requesting China for vaccines. Isn't that a clear win for China? That suddenly you have a country where anyway you have issues to deal with, and that country is now dependent and is requesting for vaccines that are saving lives. I think there are many factors where China has come down to being a straight beneficiary, and I think to that extent it's been a bit of this round. I would think that India lost this round, and while we've come out of it, but it's taken a heavy toll on us. If this gets proved that finally this was man-made, I've been saying this for a while, then the repercussions for the rest of the world are going to be very severe. I'll rest my case for now with the fact that it seems as if India did come under a bioweapons attack directly and deliberately, and the implications for the world are going to be very different from here onwards. Thank you for listening to me. Jai Hind.